Hi, this is Bob Papa, voice of the New York Football Giants, and this is the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast.
Right, so welcome back, Giants fans. And here we are again with another episode of our new series where we interview beat writers, journalists, content creators, and fans about the upcoming Giants season. Now, please welcome a very special guest in this episode, senior writer for the Sports Illustrated, but over here we best know him probably from his appearances with Dan Hanzus, Marc Sessler, and the gang on Around the League podcast, Around the NFL podcast. And it's so good to see him back on with the boys with the Heed the Call podcast. So I had to stop myself from actually coming on and saying, "Or are you kidding me?" You know, I was just I had to keep it semi-professional. Like I didn't want to come out with that. But welcome, Conor Orr. Conor Orr, nice to see you, mate.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, no, it's been awesome. I'm so excited to be with the guys again, and it just feels like having two great friends back in my life. So.
Yeah, you can really tell the chemistry as well. It's just really, really good between you guys. So the format is we'll ask you 5 questions, and then we'll have a quick fire round at the end. But before we get to the questions, was that a Kerry Gaelic football jersey I saw you wearing on the latest Heed the Call podcast? And I have to ask then, do you have any Irish heritage in you at all?
Yes. Well, so my actual last name is Hoar. We changed it. We Americanized it. So I'm from what I'm told, I'm 100% of Irish descent. And then my brother-in-law is English with Irish citizenship, and he's the one who, while he was over there, sent me that jersey. And so whenever he goes in his travels, he always knows I like kind of the whatever the jerseys of like the teams that are there and all the different unique formats and stuff. I have a really great Ireland rugby jersey. I have Ireland national soccer jersey. So he takes good care of me, but I'm glad that was a good spot. I was hoping someone would notice that.
Because it kind of threw me to begin with, because it's the away jersey and not the home jersey. So I was trying to pick it out, and then I just managed to catch the crest there throughout the interview.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I was that's why I wore it, because I knew if anybody would appreciate it, it would definitely be the Heed the Call audience, just because I mean, you guys are awesome, especially over there, Ireland, England. That whole international fan base is so awesome. I was lucky to be out in London one year and got to meet everybody, and it was an experience of a lifetime.
Yeah, so good. So we kind of over here, we kind of think, that those guys are like ours. They're not really the American podcast. It kind of feels like, we have a little bit of ownership over them. But right, so let's get into the questions. Let's get on the interview. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into sports journalism? And did you grow up having a favorite NFL team, a college team?
Yeah, so grew up big Notre Dame fans in college football. That was our big thing. My family actually are going out next week for the home opener. And so that was really the formulation of all of my football love and knowledge and everything like that. Every Saturday watching Notre Dame was a big deal. And then as I grew up and got older and noticed all my friends having NFL teams, I decided to just pick kind of the next team that was going to come into existence, because I was raised in Pennsylvania. I didn't really like the Steelers, and I didn't like the Eagles. And so I ended up going with the Browns. And then I would say kind of carried that on for a while, until right around, I would say, like the time I started having kids. They signed Deshaun Watson, and so we kind of figured we're just going to punt on that and just kind of figure something else out,
And I mean, it's great to hear, because I'm a massive Notre Dame fan myself. I actually had my honeymoon in South Bend, Indiana.
Did you? Hey, can I just disappear for like 2 minutes? Yeah. You mentioned you were honeymooning in South Bend, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I was one of those fans that the NFL sort of wanted when they came over in 07. I jumped on the Giants bandwagon in 07, and then I was one of the fans when Notre Dame came to Dublin in 2012. Fighting Irish coming over, I jumped on the bandwagon. And then in 2015, me and my wife were deciding where to go for our honeymoon. So we decided to do 1 week where she wanted and 1 week where I wanted. So that was a compromise. A big, honeymoon's a big sort of deal. So so she got to go to Buenos Aires in Argentina, and I got to pick South Bend, Indiana.
Oh, God bless your wife. That's
And
commitment.
and she doesn't like football at all.
Oh man.
So fair play to her. But I just wonder, so how did you get into sports journalism? What took you down that path?
I was a big, really big reader. I mean, I love sports. I played football growing up. But I would say once I got into college, I fell in love with just the acts of like reading and writing. I had some really cool people that I was around at the time at the student newspaper who really encouraged me to get into, becoming more of an avid reader. I had always been subscribed to Sports Illustrated my whole life. And so having that as background, I think was really important. And so just kind of learning that I was capable of doing that, I think really kind of motivated me, and knowing that I wanted to stay close to sports, but also be in a field where I could be creative and sort of use a lot of different skills. So I was really lucky. It all came together. I kind of just walked into the student newspaper and everyone there was awesome. And they, wanted me to hang out, and, that those ended up being like my best friends. And so, yeah, it was kind of crazy how it all just sort of goes from there,
Oh, that's brilliant. So speaking about articles and stuff like that, two of your interesting articles this off season. Big questions. Was all the listeners really want to know this? Was Joe Sheehan right for not paying Saquon Barkley, and were they right for not reaching for a QB in this year's draft and sticking with Daniel Jones?
So I think it's twofold, right? I do think they were right to not overpay for Saquon because you're not in that position right now. And I think, like, I always tell Giants fans this: what if you flipped the Brian Daboll's first season and his second season? How much more sense would everything make now? Because I think that's kind of, not to say that, things are should or shouldn't be, but I think that's kind of the order that it was meant to go in. Like, I really do think that this team won a few more games than they expected during their first season. I think they anticipated and kind of hoped for a rebuild. At least a short-term rebuild, but now they're kind of thrust into this middle class where they have to make these uncomfortable decisions. Like last year, really their only big upgrade was going after someone like Darren Waller, but it was such a cheap signing relative to what they could have done in free agency. And so now you're seeing what I think was meant to be the true year 3, and you're trimming away some of the fat on the roster. You're allocating some of that money toward the strength of your team, which you believe is going to be your defensive line and your pass rush. Mm-hmm. And so I have no problem at all shifting those funds from Saquon Barkley to Brian Burns. I mean, not that Saquon wasn't a great player, not that he wasn't popular, but the money that he got from Philly was great. And I just think it's hard to commit that to someone who I do believe that you're going to be able to recreate statistically in the aggregate with, a couple of, a handful of players, mm-hmm. like drafted guys, free agents, stuff like that.
And Daniel Jones, how do you feel about him going forward?
Yeah, I mean, the Daniel Jones thing, I mean, everybody always says, oh, this is a terrible contract. It's a terrible contract. Why did they do it? I don't think it was that bad. Mm-hmm. I mean, really, you got a 2-year out, and I think he buffered you from, you could explore the top of the quarterback draft this year without fearing that you were going to really offend anyone. I mean, everyone knew what the deal was when they signed Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones, I mean, there's this narrative, oh, he's angry, he's competitive this offseason, but he knew it the moment that he signed that contract, right? That he had a very limited window to prove himself, and that this was a potentially generational quarterback class. And so, the Giants were right to look. I just don't think anybody was budging at the top. And I think it was smart to not reach for someone like J.J. McCarthy or Bo Nix or Michael Penix if you weren't comfortable with them and you didn't like them. If you only like the top 3 guys, all you can do is explore, see what the offers are, and then back out if it's too expensive. And so I think they put themselves in a really good spot, to the point where, I mean, you look at next year, the free agency class is going to be pretty good. And you could make a run at as, a really talented veteran. Who knows what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins at this point, or someone like Dak Prescott, if the Dak deal doesn't get done before the start of this season. There could be options for them out there, and they could be quicker to competition,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember in a podcast leading up to the draft, and I was saying to the guys, when they were talking about trading up and stuff like that, I said, if these 3 quarterbacks at the top are as good as people think they are, those teams are not moving off those picks.
Yeah. And really, I mean, if someone like Brian Dable, who knows the position really well, is calling you and saying, I'm interested in this guy, isn't that all the more reason to take the guy, because if that guy wants him, that probably means he's pretty good. I mean, Brian Dable, say what you will, but I mean, that guy changed the outlook on Josh Allen's career entirely. I think he knows the position really well. Tommy DeVito wasn't a surprise. He was well coached, and I think that there's something to that,
Yeah, definitely agree. So the Giants obviously did Hard Knocks this year. Now that it's over, what's your overall thoughts about the series and the team?
I mean, I'm a fan of anybody getting, behind the scenes access. I would say that like Hard Knocks generally to me is becoming a little bit more white noise, because it's like every team now is doing some version of that, either on their own or with a television partner. And you can get good at sort of creating your own narrative, even through like all access type content. And so for me, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, is this really how this went down? Are they showing one side of the phone call? I mean, to not tell Saquon Barkley that phone call was going to air on HBO, I thought was downright irresponsible, even though New Jersey is a one-party state, where, at least over here in America, right, we have one-party states, two-party states, and no-party states, where legally you have to let the other party know they're being recorded. And so since the Giants phone call was taking place in New Jersey, they didn't have to inform Saquon Barkley that the call was being recorded. But it goes back to these, like, this human element of it. It's like, why are we doing this? Did we learn something about the Giants? Sure. But was the show ultimately, I think, just pretty good at showing off what they wanted to show off about themselves? Yeah. And I think that's largely the truth with most of the teams that do this.
Yeah, definitely. So last season was challenging. The New York Giants had lots of injuries. Andrew Thomas went down in the first game. Quarterback Daniel Jones went down as well. It was so difficult. But this upcoming season, what should Giants fans expect from Joe Sheehan and Dable in year 3?
I mean, I think it's definitely going to be a competitive team, but it's going to be a young team, right? So there's going to be these games where they look like they have it all figured out, and there's going to be games where, their secondary gets torched for 400 yards. And it's just by virtue of, like, you're breaking in, like, one of the most important positions in the NFL on the fly. You have a lot of young cornerbacks, you have a lot of young guys in the secondary, and a good pass rush can't mitigate all that, And so I think it's one of those situations where I would look at the next 2 years as sort of one really long season, and assume that at some point you're probably going to replace the quarterback with a veteran, or you're going to draft high at the beginning of next year's draft, if Daniel Jones gets injured and Drew Lock doesn't play well. So I still like Lock a lot. I think he could have potential to be actually a pretty good quarterback. But yeah, I mean, I think you have to grow with this team and not expect there to be some sort of an immediate solution. And you have to sort of reflect and look back on the fact that, like, man, I mean, this team was mismanaged for a long time, and while they drafted some good players, they hired bad coaches. They let go of some good players. They failed to draft some other players. And so now you're in this position where it does have to kind of suck for a little while. And I do think that they're kind of coming through the other side of that now.
Yeah, it's so difficult. I mean, like, leading into the season, it's almost like you only see them pass the eye test, for want of a better term. It's almost like you can't really take statistics and stuff like that. Yes, it would be nice to score 30 plus points every game and have teams score less than 20 and stuff like that. But it's all about, do you feel like we're moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly do. But I think that, unlike a lot of Giants fans, I kind of understood what the score was from the beginning. Like, I really do think that team just crazily outplayed themselves that first year. I mean, and then to run into like a kind of a soft Vikings team in the playoffs, you get this misperception of really what you are, or at least from the fan base. I mean, I think all those guys knew that, like, this was going to take some time. But, now how do you sort of pacify the fan base and also build something sustainable? But you look at it and it's like, man, if this offensive line can get going, if they can find the quarterback, like, this team is a very quick, the NFC East is opening up. I mean, I would not bet against the Giants in the long term.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, the offensive line, you mentioned it. It's just about getting, like, average play or a little bit above average play from the offensive line. For too long now, it's, there's been too many turnstiles there in that offensive line, and no quarterback can really play well behind something like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's why you change offensive line coaches. You try to switch things up. You try to do anything you can to generate that improvement.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to ask you about your bold predictions for the 2024 NFL season article that you did. You did have New York Giants said they would finish the season with their quarterback in the near future, and his name was Drew Lock. You had the Giants saying 6.5 wins. You said they'll easily get over that. And you said the Giants will have two vastly improved young offensive linemen in John Michael Schmitz and Evan Neal. Now, has your opinion changed at all in any of those points?
Well, it's been tough, right? John Michael Schmitz just hasn't been healthy, and Evan Neal too. It's just and I think that they've missed out on a valuable portion training camp where Brian Dable was going hard. There was a lot of 11 on 11, and you would have had a lot more reps against guys like Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. And so I think that there was definitely a sort of there's a big missed opportunity there. And when we were looking at it in June, it looked like one of these kind of golden chances for them to kind of jump into the fire and forge themselves that way. So am I backtracking? No. I mean, I always liked Evan Neal. I thought when the Jaguars had the number 1 pick that year, I was puzzled as to why they didn't take him. I loved his college game, and I do think there's a really good offensive tackle in there somewhere. I think he's just got to find it.
I mean, all 32 teams loved him. It wasn't like a shock pick when he went there. It wasn't like an Eric Flowers back in the day when everyone was shocked that he went in the top 10. So Drew Lock, do you think you mentioned before that he still has something about him? For me, I do think he's got sort of the arm that Daboll likes. He has that sort of gunslinger mentality. Do you think settling into this offense that maybe he could have show something?
Yeah, and I think you can design something around him. I mean, Drew Lock played in college in a really RPO heavy system. And while it's not totally ideal to sort of totally base everything that you major in the NFL off of that, Brian Dable could design something really quick, and I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but you get that guy to play on schedule. He's got the arm talent, and now you're building that receiver talent out where, everybody always said, oh, the Bills traded for Stephon Diggs when they had no other wide receiver talent, and Brian Dable got him the ball with regularity all the time. He still created matchups for him. He can do the same thing for Malik Neighbors. And, I think Drew Lock is one of those guys that he can get the ball out fast if he can play on schedule. I mean, remember, he had a really good stretch at the end of, I want to say, his first or second year with the Broncos, whenever Vic Fangio was the head coach that year, and played really well toward the end of that season, and then just sort of disappeared into quarterback purgatory, but a lot of these guys like Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, they're coming back and they're having good careers. And I wonder if Drew Lock is one of those guys.
Yeah, definitely. Just if you don't mind, just quickly thoughts on Malik Neighbors' pick and the Brian Burns trade. How do you think those choices went down?
Yeah, I mean, I think any way to get ahead, especially you look at the economics of this year's draft, it was not a good pass rusher class. The Giants knew they'd need other things high up in the draft, and if they didn't get the quarterback, they'd go with the wide receiver. I think they played the strength of the draft class really well, and then supplemented that by really taking advantage of just malpractice on part of the Panthers. I mean, Brian Burns should have been traded a year ago for way more, and to be able to get him at that price trade-wise, and then to still lock him in on what I thought was a fairly reasonable extension before all the deals hit, before the cap goes up, before Micah Parsons signs his contract and destroys the market, I thought was really smart, and I think when people are criticizing the GM, I get it, but the GM, this is kind of what he's responsible for. This is what he majors in. And I think those things that he has done so far, he's done really well. And with the Neighbors pick, I thought it was good. I was surprised. I thought Roman Dunze was probably more a Giants type player, but I think it's cool that Brian Dable wants that alpha mentality. He wants guys that are going to start fights in practice. He wants people who are going to be competitive and ruthless. And I think that Neighbors is certainly one of those guys for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Throughout the whole Hard Knocks, you could see that Brian Dable, that Neighbors was his guy, that he really wanted to have him there. And just on the Brian Burns, I mean, I'm so glad that the deal was in place to extend Brian Burns, because you're looking at what's happening with Sam Reddick now, where he's he's been traded and he's not turning up to camp and stuff like that. So I think all around, I think it was good moves by Joe Sheehan, to be honest.
Yeah, that's the thing that's unique to the Jets. I think I've never heard of a player swinging a trade, and then the way that that's happening is utterly fascinating.
Right. So before we get the quick fire round, I just want one last question. Eli Manning, first ballot Hall of Famer, yes or no?
Yes. Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
yes. And I think it's going to be a fun thing for us to argue about. I think, all the American talking head people on TV are going to have a great time with it. But there's absolutely no way that the NFL denies a Manning a first ballot Hall of Fame opportunity. I don't care. Like, he won 2 Super Bowls. Say what you will about the rest of the career, but the NFL is not going to make that guy wait. I mean, they're just not. He's going to be in. He's going to give the speech. They're going to have a whole Eli weekend. I was out there for the Michael Strahan Hall of Fame weekend. It's a good time for the Hall of Fame. Giants fans travel well. This is not happening. There's no way it's not happening.
I think just all the other fans of other teams are just like they're on it, and they'll be enraged, but
Of
we'll be
course
the
they
ones
will.
smiling.
And it's something fun for us to talk about.
Yeah.
But honestly, I mean, I saw one of those 2 Super Bowls in person. I covered Eli Manning. He was a great guy. And I think that he played the best in really big moments. And I do think that matters. I think also he had, through the back end of his career, not a lot of help. And by the time he got the help, I think he was just a little too old, But I don't think that should disqualify him from the Hall of Fame by any stretch.
Completely agree. No, you'll get no arguments over here.
Yeah.
So just a quick fire round then, just quickly here as we go. Favorite other sports teams other than football?
Oh, I'm a big Baltimore Orioles fan for Major League Baseball. And we picked a Premier League team, so we're Fulham fans. We saw a game out there, and it was awesome. And I'm sure that there are other Premier League teams where the games are like a lot more fun, but that was my first crack at it. And so I think I'll always kind of just be in love with that, team. And then, of course, we still love Notre Dame. It's part of our Saturday ritual is watching them, and I think we always will for sure.
Oh, very, very good. I know, like Fulham's owner, Shad Khan, is the owner of the Jaguars as well. So
yeah,
nice little tie in there. So what's the best stadium you've ever been to? NFL stadium?
SoFi was pretty impressive where the Rams play for the Super Bowl. The Cowboys Stadium say what you will about it, but it's incredibly impressive. But I feel like I was really lucky to get to go to games at like Lambeau Field, for example, like where it's sort of the classic older stadium, and there's some history there. Yeah. And it hasn't been taken over by like some cell phone company or something yet,
Well, leads me on to the worst stadium. Which one would you not like to go back to?
Oh, the Commanders. It's
everyone says that.
No question. With a close second to the old Chargers, when they were down in San Diego, was pretty bad. But the Commanders, it was bad. It's bad for so many reasons. And I'm not normally one of those people who roots for teams to get new stadiums, because I do think it's sort of it's an unfair drain on public funding. But the Commanders need a new stadium. It's awful.
And what's the favorite game you've ever attended?
Oh, that's a good question. So great throwback to the people who love the Around the NFL podcast. Getting to sit with those guys for the Patriots Seahawks Super Bowl, where they didn't run on the 1 yard line, and sitting right behind Wes when that happened was one of the great moments of just being a person watching football and watching him watch the game. I think that was probably one of my favorite moments ever, being a sports writer. And that was really cool. I mean, that was just one of those moments where you're stunned into complete silence,
Oh, brilliant. Kind of glad you mentioned Chris, actually, because obviously we love him over here. And it's just so sad to hear about his passing. So sorry. Condolences to all you guys over there. It's not good. But right, so moving on. So funniest player you've ever interacted with?
Funniest player I've ever interacted with? It's a good question. I mean, I think a lot of players have really good personalities. You have to have that to be able to function well. Martellus Bennett was like a great old Giants tight end. Always had something funny to say. I think Eli was funny in his own way. Sort of had that deadpan sense of humor about him. Gosh, I mean, there's so many. I mean, but
Was there anyone that you thought was a bit strange, a bit weird out there?
Well, that's the other side of the coin, right? You have to be so committed to this that you do have to have sort of a screw loose. But I would say that every player to a man would say that about us too, right? Like, I mean, we work crazy weird hours for a fraction of the pay. It's merely because we love this, you know. And so whenever we walk into a locker room, we think some of these guys are crazy, and they think that we're double that. You know, they think we're double crazy. And so, you know, it's hard for me to say like, oh, this guy's out there when, you know, everybody probably thinks the same thing about me every time I walk into a room, you know.
Yeah, we were actually lucky enough last season to be invited over by the Giants and got press credentials and got in the press box and got to the conferences afterwards in the locker room and stuff like that. So that was a very, very cool experience from a few lads from Ireland and England heading over to the States. Like,
no doubt. And it's, I mean, you know, hopefully you got to explore more than northern New Jersey during your time there. But, you know, nothing wrong in New Jersey. It's great. That's where I live. But,
yeah. So you mentioned you've been to an international game. Have you been to a few of them or just one, or do you plan to come back over again to any international games?
One, yeah. I was Bills Jags in 2015, I want to say, and it was incredible. I mean, amazing experience. You know, just being there, taking it all in, meeting people all week. Me and Marc Sessler were over there together, and we did an event at this bar called the Red Lion in London, and just getting to meet all the fans was like, I mean, there's nothing better than that. Just seeing how many people appreciate your work and, you know, being able to interact with so many people. I always say this, like, London, England in general, probably has the smartest pocket of fans, and I'm not just pandering here. And I think Ireland to a degree too, like, not to lump everybody in together, but I think they are a far more knowledgeable fan base that is intimately aware of like the entire roster, all the players, how everything fits together. And so I felt like I had to be more on my game meeting them than I ever do just talking to people here in the States.
Oh, brilliant. Well, that's a brilliant way to end the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on, Conor. I appreciate it so much. Do you want to let people know where they can find all your stuff?
Yeah, Sports Illustrated, SI.com. Yeah, I'm looking forward to, you know, reaching out, meeting everybody again, talking to everybody through Heed the Call too. So give the guys a listen as well.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we all hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and all that lovely stuff. Social links are in the description below. Until next time, as always, let's go Giants.